Right, so I suspect I come from looking at this from a completely different angle than most people here. There's this long-established and largely fictional left brain, right brain idea of logic versus creativity, and I suspect there's a lot of right brain people in the room here. I come from a strictly left brain world. So at Wolfram, what we've been doing is things that 20 years ago were called AI, but now just thought of as computation. So things like maths and statistics and geospatial computation and network analysis and all of these kinds of mathematical things used in science and engineering and business analysis. All of these things we've been trying to automate for many years. So that doesn't feel, on the face of it, like creativity. But our view on computational thinking has always been that there's a kind of a four-step process of you've got to ask the right questions that you're trying to investigate. You need to find an abstraction into maths or programming language or some other representation. There's a computational step where you turn the handle on the computation, answers pop out, and the final step where you have to interpret and figure out where you're going next. And what we've been doing is trying to automate step 3 of that science computational thinking process for many years. But certainly steps 1, 2, and 4 are the human creativity. So we've always been a side-by-side tool, the kind of Mr. Spock to the Captain Kirk, whispering in the ear saying, actually, the correct answer is this all the time. And what things like GPT have come along now and done is help to automate step 2 of that process, the abstraction. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So you might think that this kind of arrival of new ways of doing things is an existential threat, and it is to a lot of organizations. And when it looked like logical thought was emerging from GPT, then we sat down and took it seriously. But actually, when you look at these two worlds of the kind of modern large language model AI and our traditional old-fashioned AI approach of computation, they're actually almost exact opposites in terms of their strengths and weaknesses. That there is no doubt that these new conversational LLM models are amazing at being fluent and human-like and being able to create text that has structure and meaning. They seem to know lots of things, but actually they're terrible at all of those things that we've been traditionally doing. And perhaps it's telling that humans find maths quite hard, and perhaps it's the same underlying reason why language models find maths and computation quite hard. So even when the numbers get big, even as something as simple as addition, LLMs get wrong, let alone complicated things like calculus and the like. So they're not very good at following rules. They have short working memory, so they can't do data science, but they have these other amazing abilities. So our view on the world has been to try and bring those two worlds together, and that's been the focus on what we've been thinking about. And one of the things you have to address early when you are in a computational world, which is reproducible, reliable, deterministic usually, is the LLM's desire to hallucinate. And I hope I'm not going to upset anyone here, but the conference gave me a great example of this because they sent me the bio that they were posting on the website for this conference, and I knew immediately when I looked at it, they put it through ChatGPT. Because having an ego, I've done exactly the same thing. I said, tell me about Jon McLoone, and I get all this, some of it's accurate, some of it's very flattering in its framing of it. But in this particular run-through, I've highlighted some things that are just fiction. I did not join Wolfram Research in 2004. I joined in 1992. I've been there all my life. And I did not author the hands-on start to Wolfram mathematical or the numerical computing with Wolfram language. I haven't checked to see if I might be in the Think Use section at the front of those books, but I know the authors, so I know I didn't write those. And it's not even just bad luck. 3 consecutive runs. This time it's joined in 96, and I've got a degree from a university that I've never studied at, and a PhD from here in Oxford, where they rejected me from my undergraduate, so I've definitely not come back to do a PhD here. And actually, fluid dynamics was the course I pretty much failed at university. So that's equally nonsense. And I tried it a third time, and it's come up with a new date, 3 different dates where it thinks I joined the company. And it now prescribes my expertise being algorithmic trading and quantitative finance, which is another area I have to say I'm rather weak on. Certainly not an area of expertise. Now, the problem with the LLMs, also from our point of view, isn't just that they make stuff up. They make stuff up convincingly. And when you start trying to mix them with the kind of world we're in of doing computational and sort of numerical and mathematical things, then they're more likely to not know the answer. So they're more likely to just imagine plausible answers. And then the fact that they're convincing makes them quite dangerous. And this is an example that I ran here, which was, tell me about livestock populations in Turkey. And it's written me a nice essay here. And obviously my eyes are drawn to the numbers here. You know, that there's so many cattle and so many sheep, so 33 million sheep, it says. But it's trying to convince me here, because its job is to write plausible words. Its job is not to think. It says, according to data from Turkstat. Now, I've seen examples where it completely makes up citations. So I slightly dubiously Googled Turkstat. And Turkstat exists. It's a data source. So that sounds really convincing now. It's a big old site, and it took me about 5 minutes to trawl through indexes until I found the relevant document, which is livestock populations in 2020, that it claims to be citing, and the number's just different. So, like that kind of loudmouth, confident guy in the pub who tries to convince you by saying things really emphatically that he really knows all about stuff, it's all just a cover for the fact that the contents are imagined for plausibility. So this is where we kind of entered the LLM conversation. What we want to do is to take these two worlds and think of them as left brain, right brain, and build the connectivity, just like we have in our brains, if it were a left brain, right brain thing, where your creative part is saying, oh, just say this, it sounds really good, and your rational part's going, oh, but that's a lie. Maybe I should kind of bring the two facts together. We're trying to make these joins between the two worlds to try and have the best of both sides. So actually, let's see if we can do this live. I've got my phone connected up here. Let's do a new chat here. And what I'm going to use is okay, I'm not going to get enough bandwidth. Good thing I pre-cached things. Should I give up on this? Right, let's just use the saved version. We were invited to be one of the first plugins for ChatGPT. We've been announced as plugins for Bard and Bing, and we have an unannounced collaboration with another large AI provider that hopefully we'll be able to announce soon. But basically, the reason why we're invited is because we fill this gap. So here's the same question again with the Wolfram plugin turned on. And what it does now is we taught the AI enough about when we might be able to answer the question. So when we ask the same question, the first thing it does is it go off to say, use Wolfram. And behind the scenes, this is an English language to English language conversation. So it rephrases the question in a way that we can parse the English. We're not nearly as fluent as GPT. So if you give it a complicated question, it has to pick out like a 3 or 4 word version of the question. And then we provided numbers, which it's then woven the narrative around. And then I've gone a bit further and said, make a bar chart. And this time it's written Wolfram language programming code to make a picture that we've then returned. And LLMs are, on the whole, quite good at sticking to facts you've given them. They're only hallucinating when they are trying to fill in gaps. When you give them facts, they tend to do the right thing. So we've got this sort of fluency of the writing from GPT, but the accuracy of, in this case, it's just a database lookup, but of computation and modeling and those kind of predictive analytics that have been built up in the sciences and engineering world. Now, what we're trying to do is build an infrastructure where anyone who can write code can build applications. So here's the same thing, but here I'm doing it the opposite way around, and I'm doing it from a code point of view. The first one we said to the LLM, here's a tool, use it if you want. But in this setup, what I'm doing is I'm setting up a piece of code where I'm driving the LLM from the computation world. So this could be part of some big computational script that builds a web page or whatever. And this is my lightweight version of computational journalism. So I've wrapped the LLM in a way that behaves like a mathematical function, like sine and cos. And in this case, it takes 3 arguments. It's write a blah summary of a blah share price yesterday, given the following facts, blah. And then I'm feeding it, when I call that function, a random style. I suppose what I should do is do some projection and say, if the share price is going up, be optimistic. If the projections go down, be pessimistic. This is just a name, and then I've given it the facts here that I've looked up, the open, high, close, low close volume prices of Microsoft yesterday, and here's the narrative that it writes. Again, weaving the two together, but this time computation's in control. Now, there's something to be said at this point when we're doing kind of computational journalism is what is creativity? I said at the beginning that basically creativity was making stuff up, and of course we're trying to do journalism. It should be factual and giving it the numbers. So there is a notion in the LLMs of a temperature, which is the amount of randomness that basically works out what's the most likely word to follow. Now, if you've got a temperature of 0, it puts that word in. It makes it essentially a deterministic function. But it turns out that's not very human-like. We can spot that very boring mechanical way of writing. If you turn the temperature up to 1, and that's when you use ChatGPT online, that's where it's set, then it becomes more creative and it elaborates and it puts style in and has a risk of introducing things that aren't true. You know, it's saying boding well for the company. Well, maybe that's because I told it to be optimistic, or maybe it's just invented that. And so we've got this sort of lever of how boring and autistic do you want to be, reeling out the facts, versus you know, creative and flamboyant. And of course, you can go further. At some point, somewhere around 1.6, it starts to break down. So here it's now getting quite creative, but towards the end, it seems to be just talking nonsense about drowned out by nasophilia, which seems unlikely to be something to do with the driving forces. And by the time you get to 1.9, it's just on an acid trip and it's spurting junk. But somewhere in that sort of 0 to 1.5 range, you've got some level of control of what you want, what you mean by creativity. And then looping back around to where I started, our world is deterministic and programming. One of the things that that brings is certainty, and you know exactly how it's going to behave, but it locks out a lot of people who can't program. We've got this creative world that can generate and synthesize things. One of the other things there's a couple of things that are less obvious that we are very excited about than chat. You know, synthesizing text is pretty, but we've you know, stayed in business for 30 years without being able to do that at all. But handling unstructured data, which is not really about conversation, but it's about understanding language, being able to read a doctor's patient record and extract facts out from doing data science. But also the idea of synthesizing code. And I'm not going to try and do this live after all. We've been extending our idea of the notebook metaphor to be able to have a conversation with the chat so that it is an assistant for code. And in the notebook paradigm, you can scroll back. It's not like command line where once you've uttered something, it's stuck in the history and you can't go back. In our notion of the notebook, you're building up a narrative that you can go back and change the values. So I start this conversation with, I want to plot the first 1,000 prime numbers. It generates some code, and now it executes that code, and I got my plot. Interesting, a bit spiky, so I said make a moving average with the window size of 100, and it's modified the code, and now we've got a smooth version. Then I say, does that fit a log curve? And it says, okay, there's a log curve we can fit to that, and there's the plot. Oh, and I think I went on to ask it for a p-value of, is that a plausible fit? And we've got now accessibility that is a different world from the traditional ones. It used to be code for nerds, point-and-click GUIs for ordinary people. Now there's this bridge between the two where you can talk in fuzzy, sometimes ambiguous terms, but you get code that is readable enough that you can say, okay, that looks like what I meant, or you could edit the code and say, I don't want it to be 1,000, I want it to be 10,000 now, and rerun the code, but we have this sort of dialogue now between the computational world and the AI world. So we're sort of trying to do it both on the back end, mixing this fluency and correctness, but we're also bringing this sort of assistance world to the front end where you are to say, you can code without having to be a coder, or you can debug other people's codes without having to spend the time, and bridging that. Are we talking code, or are we talking GUIs or conversation, and mush the whole lot together. So hopefully that shows where I'm coming from, and I'll hand it to the next speaker. Thank you.